I'm very excited to talk about today's topic. Matter of fact, when I started teaching again, and I started planning my sermon calendar, what I want to do the next year, this was top of the mind for what I wanted to teach about. It starts with some stuff that in my life hasn't been all that positive. 25 years ago, when I was a young pastor, I got a call one night from a couple that was attending the church, and they said, would you come over to our apartment because we're having some relational conflict and we want to see if you can help us. And I'm like, sure, I'll come over. So I went over to their apartment, and I wasn't in there, I bet 15 minutes before all of a sudden she blew up. And she blew up with such anger towards him about everything he'd done wrong and everything. I mean, she started going back historically through a whole lot of things. And I was, a young pastor. I didn't have a brain in my head yet. And I was sitting there going, And she was really, really rough on him. And, we tried to stop, tried to calm down. Let's talk about these issues one at a time. Couldn't stop her. Finally got her out of the apartment, went on a walk, tried to talk her down, couldn't talk her down. And within a few weeks, she'd thrown him out of the house, and they were divorced. I can remember, as a young pastor, being so confused. Like, it was over immediately. And I had no idea what had just happened. Have you ever been in a conflict situation that went that badly, where maybe the friendship ended? Have you ever tried to bring up a difficult subject with somebody that you care about and had it go so bad that afterwards you wished you'd never tried? Yeah, we all had that experience. What happened 25 years ago that I wasn't aware of is that the conversation that night in that apartment went crucial. Here's what that means. A crucial conversation is defined by multiple things. There are opposing opinions, strong emotions, and the stakes are high. All three of those were present that night in that apartment. Strong emotions. The stakes were sky high. As a matter of fact, it ended up, the relationship, because we couldn't solve it, the relationship ended. This is what was taking place. I did not understand it. I didn't know how to handle that crucial conversation. The reality is, what you and I know is if you and I can't learn how to develop strong conflict resolution skills, our relationships will never, ever become what they're capable of. As a matter of fact, in those moments when the conversations turn crucial, the relationship can end up being damaged, and you can end up with the end of the relationship if you don't know how to handle it. But on the other side, here's what we all know. If you can learn how to handle those crucial conversations with wisdom and tact, your relationships can develop into things that transform your life. Either choice is ahead of all of us. So a couple of years ago, in my reading, I came across this book, Crucial Conversation. So you wonder where I got my content for today? Anything good you hear from today, just assume it came from this book. Okay? Anything good, just assume it came from this. If you're only going to read one book in the next year, this would be one of them I'd recommend for you to consider. Some of you are like, yep, one book a year, that's what I'm pushing myself on this year. Grab this one. You will not regret it. There were so many things in here that I learned about how to handle conflict in a healthy way. So we're going to talk about this today. I want to ask you to grab your notes, grab a pen. Let's talk about this. How important is this? Oh, let's back up. How important is this? How to have conversations that actually solve problems, that don't actually make them worse. So let's jump right into this. The first thing you have to understand is that dialogue is key. Dialogue is key. This is where it begins. You want to have conversations that are going to change the relationship for the better. Understand that dialogue is key. Oh man, I have way too much experience with all of this subject. Way too much. As a pastor, for all those years, you get called into nonstop conflict situations, or sometimes you create your own. So I've done both. Years and years ago, I was asked by some friends who were in the church if I would do their wedding renewal ceremony. And so I said, sure, that'd be great. Let's do this. And so they picked a date. I didn't write it down. Yeah, I have never done that before or since. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem because when the week of the wedding renewal ceremony came, my friend texted me and said, hey, we're looking forward to this ceremony this night. Normally that wouldn't be a problem. I could just make adjustments, cancel anything else that was going on to do what I had said I would do. Unless you're traveling in Michigan, leading an assessment center for church planters, and you're gone. And oh, by the way, of all the weeks that year, for me to forget, I was in Michigan. I was not able to fly back because I couldn't leave the assessment center. Needless to say, we had some crucial conversations that week. And the relationship, we struggled a little bit. Talk about, I felt terrible. Because I could only think about people that were committed to coming to this thing, food, all the stuff, all lined up, everything ready. I'm like, oh my goodness. And they felt terrible because people coming to this thing and food and everything, it's their wedding renewal. And I forgot. Are you kidding me? And I can remember that at one point, it wasn't going all that well from my perspective. I don't remember what the specific issue was, but I finally, I said something in the conversation with my friend that clarified what I wasn't saying and what I was, and kind of changed the whole direction of this conversation. And it took a lot of the pain out of it. We ended up being able to fix the problem. We moved the renewal date. And we did it later. But the friendship got stronger, and they're still friends to this day. And I can remember after that was over thinking, what did I just say? How can I relearn what I just said? Because that was great. I mean, if you can learn this, and that's what I'm saying, dialogue is key. If you learn how to talk to people the right way in those crucial conversations, you can solve problems. You can do that. The problem is, of course, when conversations get crucial, we don't talk very well. And sometimes you get to the point where you really resonate with this cartoon. This is the best time we've had together in weeks. Let's not spoil it by talking. Right? Sometimes it just feels that way. It's like everything we say is wrong. Everything we say. It's like everything we say just ticks them off even more. Okay, so I know dialogue is a challenge. So here's the goal of dialogue. The goal is this. You want to keep both sides. By the way, I apologize. Look at that tiny little space I gave you to write those 3 words in. There is no chance you can do that. So write it off to the side. Keep both sides contributing to the pool of shared meaning. That's what you want to do. You want to keep both sides, both people involved in this crucial conversation. You want to have both of them contributing to the pool of shared meaning. So let me explain what that means. So in any conflict situation, for instance, with that couple that I was talking about at the beginning, there was his agenda, there was her agenda, and in the middle is where you want to get. He had ideas and thoughts and feelings about what had happened in the past, and she had ideas and thoughts and feelings about what happened in the past, and the goal of dialogue is everyone is evenly contributing into that pool in the middle. That's the goal. Great dialogue is that. Matter of fact, in the book, it just spells it out this clearly. When it comes to risky, controversial, and emotional conversations, skilled people find a way to get all relevant information from themselves and others out into the open. And look at what he says. People openly and honestly express their opinions. Can you do this? Openly and honestly express your opinions with people you love. Share your feelings. Articulate your theories, even when your ideas are controversial or unpopular. How many friendships and relationships do you have where you can be that open? That's the goal. That's that pool of shared meaning where you can be fully honest and authentic about what you believe and think, and they can be too, and that's where great things happen. You develop that kind of relationship, but you solve your problems, you heal a tremendous amount of pain. If you can get to that point where both sides feel like they can both fully, honestly, and authentically share. That doesn't happen a lot, does it? Many, many times, it's partial sharing or not a lot of sharing at all. For lots of reasons. So that's the goal, is both sides contributing. So it doesn't happen very often, and so what happens is these conversations turn crucial, and somebody gets upset, somebody gets hurt, and that's where you need to learn how to do this. The second thing you need to do to really make dialogue happen is watch for silence or violence. Watch for silence or violence. The conversations turn crucial. This is what takes place next. Silence or violence. And you need to be able to spot this when it happens. So flip your notes over on the back. I put down a summary of what silence or violence looks like, or if you want to, you can just look up here because I put it up here. Silence you get when you ever been in a conversation with someone and they just stopped talking. They were done. Yeah, that's That's one side of this. Okay, some of you are really smiling. I don't know why. I can't imagine why you're smiling. All right, so purposely withhold information from that pool of shared meaning. Now, sarcasm, isn't that an interesting one on silence? Because you're not actually silent when you're being sarcastic. But it is a form of silence because you're not actually authentically saying what you really believe. You're being sarcastic. So it's a form of hiding. That's why it's on the list. Sarcasm, sugarcoating, ever done that? Ever held back from what you really actually fully think? It's a form of silence. Avoiding, just shut down, withdrawing. And then on the other side is violence. It's not physical violence. Don't think of it that way. It is an attempt to convince, control, or compel others to your point of view. In other words, there's only one right way to think about that, and that's mine. And your opinion doesn't really matter, and I'm going to bulldoze over you to make sure that my way is the only way. That's a lot of fun. So here's what violence, some of the things that go along with violence: name-calling, threats, labeling, belittling their opinions, cutting others off. You ever have anyone just talk right over you constantly? Isn't that fun? That's a form of violence. Speaking in absolutes, changing subjects, overstating your facts. Oh, I'm not going to talk more about that. But I want you to know, in the life of Jesus, he encountered both of these things. He encountered verbal violence from people. He's not driving out demons by the power of God. It's the power of Satan. That's what his critics said. Verbal violence intended to silence Jesus. It's not God's power, it's the devil's. Well, that's a nice thing to say to someone. Nice little label for you, isn't it? But the other side that he dealt with constantly too was silence. He dealt with this. So one time there was this man who needed to be healed on the Sabbath day, and the religious leaders were opposed to this, and he turned to his critics and he asked, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or to destroy it? Answer, save life. That's God's plan. Of course it's the right thing to do. And look at how they responded. They wouldn't respond. They would not answer Jesus. He dealt with both silence and violence in his day. But the question is this: why do people in our relationships go to silence or violence with us? Why do they go to silence or violence with us? Silence and violence is an indication they no longer feel safe to talk to you. When people go to silence or they go to violence, it's always an indication of safety. Safety is the key word. If you want to write a word next to silence or violence, write that word. They don't feel safe talking to you anymore. That's why they blow. That's why that woman in that apartment 25 years ago blew up at him. She no longer felt safe to have this conversation with him. That's why he went to silence. He didn't feel safe putting anything in the pool. It's why we do it. Safety has been violated. People don't feel safe. They're scared, and I'll show you what they're scared about in a minute, but here's what you need to understand. Nothing will kill the flow of dialogue like fear. When you fear you may be harmed in some way, you hide. And you either hide by being silent, you're just not going to share what's really inside of you because you're afraid it's going to be trash, or you blow up aggressively because that will shut them down. Both are fear reactions. Silence and violence are about fear because you don't feel safe to contribute anymore. So, when was the last time you were in a crucial conversation with someone, or you were in a conversation with someone that went crucial, and you saw either reaction? They blew up at you, or they just clammed up. This is where you start. You learn how to spot this. Then, here's what you do with it. The second thing you do is you got to make it safe, and I know I skipped a point, sorry about that. Jump down to number 2, make it safe to talk again. You've got to make it safe for them to actually open up again. Because if dialogue breaks down, problems don't get solved, issues don't even get discussed, and pain does not get healed. God wired us so that relationally is how we heal in this world, and if you can't create these kind of, we talked about 2 weeks ago, these fourth corner relationships, which is what God created us for, where our lives really become what they were capable of, if you can't learn how to spot, oh my goodness, this has just gone the wrong way, step out of it, make it safe, then you're never going to experience the life-healing power of relationships that God has for us. So in the book, one of the stories that every married couple most married couples can certainly relate to was there was a discussion about a couple that was in trouble because of the relationship sexually. He wanted more, she was totally fine with the limited amount that she said they could have. This had created so much conflict over the years that their relationship was being damaged, they could not discuss it. Sex and money, two things in marriage that are typical taboo subjects that couples cannot dialogue about. Silence or violence. This couple was no different. So one day, the woman decided she was going to risk putting something into the pool of shared meaning. She wanted to see if they could talk about this in a respectful way and make some progress on it. So she sat down next to him on the couch and she said, "Can we talk about what happened last night when I told you I was too tired?" He said, "I don't know if I'm in the mood to talk." Great line, but totally wrong, okay? Remember, sarcasm is on the silent side. It's on the silent side. And she said, "Well, what does that mean?" And now she's moving towards violence, so he just lets her have it. "I'm sick and tired of you deciding when we do what." And she walked out. Classic picture of what happens in so many relationships. We have this issue, we have to talk about it. It's creating damage. And so silence with the sarcasm, then there's a cruel remark, and silence is what happens. So no dialogue. So what will happen to that relationship is it will continue to be damaged until they learn how to talk about this. So what's going to happen? Dialogue is what God uses to bring healing, and they can't talk about it. So this is such a challenging thing. In the book, one of the things that blew me away was this. If you're really at the worst level of this topic of conflict resolution, you ignore the need for safety and express what's on your mind with no regard for how it'll be received. You ever known people like this? They're going to tell you what they think, and they don't care how it's coming across to you. They don't speak the truth in love. They just speak whatever is in their heart and mind. They don't care about the impact on your life. We all have encountered people like this. They do tremendous damage. They are the worst at dialogue. They will never experience the type of relationships God has created for them. You cannot live at this level and have great relationships. Now, there's a step up from that. There are people good at this, and they recognize that safety is now at risk, but they do the wrong thing. They water down their content, which avoids the real problem. So they can see the other person's getting upset, safety is being violated, and they back off. They don't contribute fully their opinions and thoughts and ideas into the pool of shared meaning because they don't want the conflict to escalate. And some of you are like, this is how you operate. You are not fully honest. And then he said, here's what the best in this do. This is something you can learn. They step out of the conversation. When they see that it's not safe, they see silence or violence, they step out of the topic, they make it safe, and then re-enter it again. That way, they talk, and I love this sentence. This sentence really hit me hard. They talk without sugarcoating or pretending or faking. Do you have that skill? This is a skill. Anyone can learn this. Yeah. A lot of us are like, oh, yeah, this is why I couldn't wait to teach on it. Sometimes when I'm teaching, I am just doing self-therapy, all right? Just so you all know. So this is a self-therapy message. I need this constant reminder. This is what we're supposed to be like. We're supposed to be able to do this kind of dialogue. So that's the goal, is to be that. So the question then is, so I've told you that the people go to silence or violence because they're afraid. They no longer feel safe. Do you know what fears drive them to silence or violence? In the book, they identify two major fears. Oops. The first is that they fear that they're being disrespected by you. They feel like you are going to treat what they have that's so valuable inside of them disrespectfully. Or they fear that you have a malicious purpose toward them. And the reality is we know that there are people in this world who do evil. They have malicious purposes. They want to hurt you. There are evil people in this world. The Bible says you better be able to acknowledge that. And so sometimes what we do is we project that on the people in our life. And we think that they have an evil purpose. But they're just out, oh, you're just saying this because you want to hurt me. That's why you're saying this. You're just saying this because you think I'm stupid. That's why you're saying this. You're saying this because, and we have this negative image of what we think that they're like. We project that on them. That makes us afraid. We go to silence or violence. But if you actually think someone is actually out to hurt you, you're not going to talk to them, or you are going to let them have it. You do one or the other. That's what fear does. It drives us to these behaviors that we really shouldn't be going to. Now, this sentence blew me away. This idea, look at this. People don't become defensive because of what you're saying. They become defensive because why they think you're saying it. Do you hear the difference? if they really trust you and they feel safe with you, you can talk about anything. It's when they begin to question your motives that that the fear grows, and silence or violence is the natural reaction. When they feel safe, you can talk about anything. So that's what's going on. When you see silence or violence, they're afraid because they don't trust your motives in that moment. So you've got to get back to clearing up that underlying motive issue. So again, the key, and we talk about this regularly, is watch for emotions. God has given us an amazing gift in the gift of our emotions. When you see emotional reactions in people, when you're talking to someone and the conversation goes crucial and you see this silence or violence, that's God's red flag to you saying, stop what you're doing. No steps further with the actual issue you want to talk about. Make it safe, then talk about it again. So how do you do that? First, try to understand their perspective. Letter A. You've got to try to understand their perspective. Why do they no longer feel safe with you? Why do they no longer feel safe with you? And if you can understand what's going on in their heart and their mind, then the result will be patience. God links these two themes together in the Bible with verses like this. Whoever is patient has great understanding. If you want more patience in your relationship, try and understand them. Try and understand what's going on in their head and their heart. You know, Stephen Covey in one of his brilliant book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said the very first thing in a relationship is to try to understand them before you seek to be understood. Which, by the way, fits our Christian values so well. Selfishness is not how we should be living in our relationship. It should be about the other person. So try and understand it. Understanding and patience go hand in hand. So I used this recently in a relationship that I was in that had been in some pretty big conflict. And so in the start of the conversation with this person, the goal was, help me understand. Help me understand why the reaction was this way. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? And when that understanding took place, it's like, oh, this is what you thought I was doing? I completely understand why you reacted the way you did then. When you communicate that you understand that underlying fear, you do tremendous healing. And then the next part of it is you apologize when appropriate. Not all the time do you have to apologize, but many, many, many times we have to apologize because we were rude, or we were selfish, or we were doing whatever they thought we were doing. And if you were, don't lie about it, and don't ever give a fake apology. It has to be sincere. It has to be because, oh, ouch, that's what you were thinking? I'm so sorry that I communicated that to you. That must have really hurt. The Bible says a kind answer soothes angry feelings, but harsh words are going to stir them up again. And then the third piece of this is so fun to talk about. Use contrast to fix the misunderstanding. This little skill, if you learn, if you only learn a couple of things, learn to watch for silence or violence, because it's a sign they don't feel safe, and learn how to use contrast to fix that misunderstanding. Because there's a misunderstanding, that's what's made them afraid, and so contrast can do it. Now, off on the side of your notes, write these 2 words. This is how you use contrast. You don't, and then you do. It's these 2 things, don't and do, that will create safety again in the relationship. The don't is the most important part of it, and again, just for now, just hold with me. The don't addresses what they're afraid of, and it restores safety. So let me show you what it looks like. Oh, I don't want you to think I'm blaming you for what just happened. I know this is a complicated situation, but I do want to talk about what happened so we can learn from this together. You hear the don't and the do? So the don't is, oh, in listening to them, they think that I'm only bringing this up because I want to blame them and point a finger and rub their nose in this. Okay, that's why they don't feel safe. That's why they went to silence or violence. And when you finally understand their perspective, you go, oh, I don't want to rub your nose. I'm not on a witch hunt here. I don't want to blame you. I just want to talk about what happened so we can prevent it from ever happening in the future. Do you hear that? And the don't is the most important part because it's where you it's where you communicate that you understand why they got upset in the first place, why they went to silence or why they went to violence. Here's another one. I don't mean to communicate that I don't think you're smart, but I just want to talk about what prompted you to make that decision. Not because I think you're dumb. I don't think you're dumb. Oh, you don't think I'm dumb? Okay. And you can see the fear go down, and then dialogue can take place again. You step outside. Oh, silence or violence. You step outside, try and understand why they went to silence or violence. I don't mean to communicate that. I do want to communicate this. I don't want you to think I'm saying this because I want to fire you. I do want to talk about this one area of your performance. I'm glad to have you on the team. Oh, really? You do? Oh, phew. Okay. Safety's restored. Safety's restored. You got to restore the safety before you move on. The don't is the most important part because it's creating the silence or the violence. And again, if you can restore safety, here's the good news. You can talk about anything. If you restore the safety, you can talk about anything. So have you seen relationships, again, that have gone to silence or violence? Have there been topics recently that you've tried to address with coworkers or family or friends or a spouse or your parents where silence or violence has been the outcome? It was a safety issue. So you have to step outside of that safety issue and say, help me understand why that triggered such a big reaction inside of you. I sincerely want to know. And then when you understand, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to communicate this. Here's what I just want to talk about. And restore the safety and dialogue can take place. Now, there's one other essential piece to this. By the way, I haven't actually gotten into today, and I won't today, what to actually say in the conflict situation. That's next time. This is all kind of prep work before you get to the point of the conflict conversation. Okay? And this may be the most important. Number 3, keep yourself under control. The hardest person for me to control in any situation is always me. I'm always the hardest. You're the hardest. It's easy for me to control other people. All I have to do is to do what I tell them, right? That's easy. Good night. Controlling myself is such an important part of this, and because we so easily tell the wrong stories in our head. I love this cartoon. Take a look at this. Why we'll never understand each other? What she heard. It's your lot in life to stop whatever it is you're doing in order to serve my every need. What he said. Hey, honey, do you know if we have any more AAA batteries? What she heard. Life as we know will cease to exist unless you can alter the space-time continuum. What he said. Hey, honey, are you almost ready yet? What he heard. You're way too stupid to be trusted driving alone in bad weather. What she said. Drive careful, dear. Oh my goodness, we do this constantly. This is how conflict goes in our relationships. We blow up over something that actually was never even intended to be communicated. Keep yourself under control, because here's why this is important. When you're in a conversation with somebody and it goes crucial and there's silence or violence, keep yourself under control, because you will have a natural tendency. You will either, you know this about yourself. Some of you are like, I'm the silent person. I walk away, I slam cupboards, I get sarcastic, I know what I'm like. Or you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to go to war and violence and dirty tactics, and these are the kinds of things. So you got to know yourself. So you got to keep yourself under control, because their fear reaction will trigger a fear reaction in you, and then you're in the death spiral. Right? Each of you, like that couple. She gets mad, he gets mad, she walks out, and he's ready to, great. Where does that go? One of you has to keep yourself under control. So it doesn't have to be both, and the Bible says this so much. I could have put so many verses down. A hot-tempered person stirs up the conflict, but one who is patient can calm a quarrel. So you can do this. You can learn how to calm this down. So how do you do it? First thing is you have to identify that question. When you feel yourself in a conflict situation heating up, you got to identify the answer to this question. What story did I just tell myself? Your emotional reactions don't come from nowhere. They come from the stories you tell yourself in your head. This is so important. You have to understand this about yourself. This is what happens probably every day in our lives. We see and hear something. So we tell ourselves a story. And then we feel a certain way, and that determines how we act. This is happening pretty much, I would almost assure you, every day of your life. For sure, every week. And when you're in crucial conversations, oh man, it's all over the place. You see and hear something, you tell a story, you feel, and then you act. So let's say that you're a manager and you have a new rule. Everybody needs to come on time to these meetings because everybody's starting too late, we're wasting a lot of time, and so you set this up. The very next meeting, Joe walks in 10 minutes late. You've just seen something. And what happens? You tell yourself a story. He doesn't respect me as a manager. He's just blowing me off. I can't believe he just did this. And so all of a sudden you feel hot, angry, and you act out of your anger. This happens constantly in our lives. We hear something, we tell a story. That determines how we feel, and that determines how we act. Here's the thing about stories. They're instant. It's not like you sit down and think, I wonder what story I'll tell myself about what I've just seen or heard. You don't. Your brain is a storytelling machine. It just instantly puts a story in your mind, and most of the time, not all the time, sometimes our stories are right, but most of the time they're wrong. Most of the time, they're not even close to right. And they create our feelings, and they create the conflict, and they make it so much worse, and silence or violence is the natural outcome of what we choose with our stories. So one of my favorite examples of this, years ago I was listening to this woman, her name is Brene Brown. If you go on TED.com, she has one of the best TED Talks. It's one of the highest rated. She's so intelligent, great author. And she, like everyone, she's a human. And she does this wrong. And she was telling a story one time about she and her husband had been married over 25 years. Their kids were, they had a family, and they wanted to do a special vacation at a place where she had gone a lot when she was a child. It was like a family vacation place on this lake. So they rented this home on this lake, and she was so excited. It's like, oh, it's great. So they decided that in the next morning, they were going to get up and swim all the way across the lake and back. But they'd both been competitive swimmers when they met, so no problem for them. For us, we were like, oh, I'm not going to make that. Give me a floaty tube or something. But they were going to, no problem with them. And so they get out into the lake the next morning, they're swimming, they're halfway across, and she's just overwhelmed with emotion. Because this is like her childhood vacation home, and it's a beautiful day, and the lake is beautiful, and there's just trees all around the lake. It's such an ideal place. And so she says this to her husband. She starts treading water, and she says, I feel so connected to you right now. I'm so glad we're together in this beautiful place. And without missing a beat, he says, yeah, water's good. And keeps swimming. And she's like, well, that's a weird reaction you want to just said. And so they swim across the lake, and they start back, and she thought, maybe he didn't hear me. So now he's 2 feet away, they get to their side and start back, and she says this. She said, no, I just want to tell you, it's so beautiful here. I'm so grateful we have this time together. And I feel so close to you. And he said, yeah, water's good. She beat him back across the lake, fueled by her rage. Because that's what we call making an emotional bid for connection. Your heart's like, here's what's in my heart towards you. And they're like, ow. So she's livid. Because again, that formula. She saw or heard something, so she tells herself a story. So she's sitting on the dock waiting for him to finish his lap. He crawls out of the water, and she says this to him. I'm trying to connect with you, and you're blowing me off. And the story that I'm making up right now is you either looked at me and thought, wow, you're old. Or you sure don't rock a Speedo like you did 25 years ago. Those were the stories in her head. We see or hear something, we tell a story. The story determines how we feel. Imagine either of those stories in your head. How are you going to feel? And then it determines how we act. He didn't want to talk to her at first. She finally got the truth out of him. The night before, he had a nightmare about all the kids drowning in the lake. He said he was fighting off the biggest panic attack of his life. He said, if you said anything out to me out there in the water, I didn't even hear you. Now, how accurate was the story she was telling? Welcome to our world. This is what we do constantly, every day. We tell stories. And the stories aren't even close to true. Now, this is, again, one of the most profound things I have ever learned in my life when they said this. Emotions don't settle upon you like a fog. They're not foisted upon you by others, no matter how comfortable it may make you feel. Others don't make you mad. You make you mad. You make you scared, you make you annoyed, you make you insulted, you and only you create your emotions. You do that. And here's why we do it. Here's how we do it. On your notes, I want you to write this down so that you lock this into your head today. My stories create my feelings. Now, I'm not saying the story that you've told is always wrong. Many times the story you've told is true. They are out to hurt you. Sometimes your story is right. But don't blame the other person. Always understand that it's your stories that create your feelings, and stories frequently are wrong. We see and hear things, we tell ourselves a story, we feel a certain way, so that we act based on that. This is what happens every day in our lives. So the good news is this. The second thing you got to do is you got to get back, if you're going to get yourself under control, get back to the facts. What are the facts about this? Your conclusions are subjective. They may be right or wrong. Your stories are often wrong. So what are the facts? Well, the facts are, I was swimming in the lake, I tried to connect with him, and he didn't really respond the way I wanted to. That's the fact, and it happened twice. Any conclusion you draw out of that may be right or wrong. So you get back to the facts. What are the facts actually saying? Don't focus on the conclusions. What are the facts? And then retell the story. This is so cool that we have the power to do this, that God has given us a brain that we can actually go back and retell the story. That we're not just victims of what we've believed in our head, that we actually can retell our story. So flip your notes over in the back. Here's how to do that. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. But I love this second one. This is the one that I use constantly, so I'm just going to emphasize this one, because this is the one I love. Why would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do what this person is doing? If Brene Brown had been in the middle of the lake and had actually paused for a moment, hey, here's how I'm feeling, here's the story I've told, and asked this question, she would have come to a completely different conclusion, right? That's what you do. If you're with someone and you know they love you, and you love them, try this question. It will change the story that you create in your head, which will change how you feel, which will change what you do. It's amazing how cruel we are towards people that we say that we love and who love us. It doesn't have to be. We can tell good stories about those people. Oh, man. I'm so excited about this. I can't wait to talk again about what we do next, because this is all prep work, as you can see. This isn't even how to actually say anything yet. We haven't got to that, but here's why I am so passionate about this subject today. When I first read that book almost 2 years ago, I was so excited I made all the staff read it, and then taught on it. But not long after I read it, and the staff was going through it, I was in a meeting one day, a couple of staff members in the room, and one of them hadn't had anything to eat, and it was the afternoon, and I was concerned that this person was going to get run down, maybe get a headache, maybe not feel good if they didn't get anything to eat. And they had their food in the fridge. So I said, oh, when I found out they hadn't eaten, I said, well, why don't you go get your food? We'll wait for you. We can do the meeting while you're eating. And they're like, no. And I thought, well, that's unnecessarily stubborn. There's this story I started telling myself. They're going to make themselves sick. And so how do I handle it? With my typical way, I made fun of their decision. I used sarcasm to mock the decision they were making that I thought was stupid. Why don't you just go get your food? You'll feel better. We'll be happier. It's a win-win. But the person was adamant. And then when I made that sarcastic remark, the person went to violence. Not, not jumping up and screaming and going crazy, but really shut me down quickly with the comments. It's like, okay, this is a subject that I can't talk about. So I'd already learned this. I read it. We talked about it as a staff. So after the meeting was over, I sat down and I did these steps. I'm like, okay, so here's what I just saw and heard. Here's the story I'm telling in my head. And the story was a kind one. It was like, oh, they must just be having a hard day. They must just be having a bad day, and that's why they snapped at me in this meeting. And so I wanted to see if I could sit down with that person, and I sat down with staff members and said, here's what happened. I walked through this, and here's what I see, and so this is a story I'm telling in my head. Is that you're just having a hard time? Do you need to talk about anything? Well, they needed to talk about something. And because of this, because of that meeting that day, for the first time in my life, and I was 45 years old at the time, I became aware of the destructive use of my humor. I thought the issue was them. And it was only about 10 minutes in that conversation when I realized, oh my goodness, it's me. I can't tell you how weird it felt sitting in the office that day. It was like the room was closing and it was like, oh my, this can't be true, that this is me. I walked out, sat down. Many of you heard me talk about what came next. I sat down and I started journaling about how I use my humor in destructive ways, and I began to identify the fact that I use humor to mock people when I disagree with them or they disagree with me. Or if you hurt me, I'll use my humor. It's all sarcasm. It's all intended to put you down. And my whole life began to change, and all the positive change that changed in my life from that day on were rooted in that crucial conversation. My life is better because of this. And I want your lives to get better. I want you to know what it's like to have those fourth corner friendships and relationships where they can speak into your life and change you for the better, like to become the person God wants you to be. And this is how you do it. So I know I'm only speaking to a couple of people, or two different groups of people. Those of you who are in the middle of conflict right now, and those of you who are headed for conflict. That's it. That's the world we live in. For those of you in the middle, some of you are realizing, oh my goodness, the conversations I'm in have gone crucial. Some of you have spotted, as you're sitting here today, like, oh, silence or violence, I got both, or one or the other, and you've seen it now, okay. So now what you do is you recognize safety has been violated. They don't feel safe talking to you. So you've got to restore safety. And you're going to do that by sitting down and saying, this hasn't been going very well. Would you start over with me? Help me understand why you don't feel safe to talk to me about this issue. And discover what that safety issue is. And then if you have done something stupid or selfish or wrong, apologize for that, sincerely. Add in the don't and do. I don't want to communicate that anymore. And I'm sorry that I have. I do want to just talk about this so we can have the kind of relationship I want to have. Keeping yourself under control, okay? See how easy this is? Just go do that. We'll need to do this message again. For those of you who are facing it, again, it's going to happen. You're going to encounter this, so learn to watch for that silence or violence. And when you see that, oh my goodness, safety's at risk. They don't feel safe to talk to me. Step out of it, deal with the underlying issue, and then step back into it. You're going to be saying this through this whole relationship series that we're doing. All of life is about relationships. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when we started this series. God wired your body to function at the highest level, at the best level, when you're in deep relationships with other people. That's why the series is so important, and ultimately for us, it's about a relationship with God. It's not just that we're transformed by relationships with people, we're transformed by a God who wants not rituals from us, not religion from us. He wants a relationship with us. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish today. The Bible says that you and I, we have lived in conflict with God, not because He is at war with us, but because of our choices have put us at odds with Him. And so, incredibly, 2,000 years ago, this loving God sent His Son into the world to die on a cross for us. To pay for what we've done that's wrong, to completely cleanse our souls, so that we can go from where we are to where He wants us to be in this new relationship with Him. He comes to make His home inside of us. And we get God's help and intervention from this day forward. If you have been settling for religion and you want to try something different, maybe this is the first time you've even heard or understood He wants a relationship with you, not rituals. You can have that relationship today. It's a simple step of faith where you acknowledge something like this. You can say something like this in your heart to God. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I know there are things I've done that are wrong. And I've heard today that you died on a cross to pay for that. Would you please forgive me? Would you please give me a relationship with you today? In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so like I said, if you want to, next week they'll be showing an Eagle Brook video. In 2 weeks we will continue this. So go practice for 2 weeks. So